The smell of pine and cinnamon hit me the moment I stepped through Carrie's front door. Christmas Eve at the McMansion, as I'd come to think of it. 22 family members already scattered through the professionally decorated living room, champagne flutes catching the light from a 12-foot tree that probably cost more than my first car. I'd driven up in a rental, nothing fancy, a gray sedan that disappeared into any parking lot. My clothes were simple too. Dark jeans, a navy sweater, small gold studs in my ears. I'd learned a long time ago that drawing attention to myself in this house only made things worse. "Vanessa, you made it." Carrie swept toward me, her smile perfect and her eyes already cataloging everything about my appearance. The hug she gave me was the kind you give to distant acquaintances. Brief, performative. "I wasn't sure you'd come this year." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. The lie came easy. After 15 years of these gatherings, I'd gotten good at them. She guided me toward the dining room, her hand on my elbow like I might wander off and embarrass her. "We're about to sit down for dinner. I saved you a spot." The spot, as it turned out, was at the far end of the table. The children's table overflow. I was 34 years old, a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, second in command of SEAL Team 7, and I was seated between my 8-year-old nephew and a cousin's teenager who was more interested in her phone than conversation. I said nothing. I simply sat down, unfolded my napkin, and prepared myself for what I knew was coming. Dinner proceeded the way it always did. Carrie held court from the head of the table, Derek beside her, their matching sweaters probably costing more than some families' entire Christmas budgets. The food was catered. The wine was expensive. And the conversation inevitably turned to achievements. "So," Carrie announced, tapping her glass to get everyone's attention, "I have some exciting news. As of January 1st, I'll officially be Vice President of Operations at Henderson and Clark." Applause erupted around the table. Derek beamed at her. Mom clutched her chest like Carrie had just announced the cure for cancer. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom said, tears in her eyes. "We're so proud of you." I clapped along with everyone else. Genuinely. Despite everything, I could recognize hard work when I saw it. My sister had climbed her corporate ladder with determination. I respected that, even if she'd never respect anything I'd done. "And Derek just got his year-end bonus," Carrie continued, squeezing his hand. "We're thinking of adding a sunroom to the back of the house." More congratulations, more praise. Then came the pivot. I felt it before she even turned her head toward me, the slight shift in her posture, the way her smile tightened just a fraction. "So, Vanessa," her voice carried across the table, ensuring everyone heard. "What about you? Any news, any direction yet?" 22 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. The pitying looks from aunts and uncles. The barely concealed smirks from cousins who'd heard this routine before. My nephew beside me had stopped eating, sensing the tension even at 8 years old. "Work keeps me busy," I said carefully. "Same as always." "But what exactly is it you do?" Aunt Patricia leaned forward, her wine glass dangerously full. "I never can keep track. Something with the government." "She works for the Navy, Patricia," Mom said, then sighed. "In some capacity." "I just want to see both my daughters settled," she added, looking at me with that familiar disappointment. "Is that so wrong?" Derek cleared his throat. "You know, Vanessa, if you're looking for something more stable, I could probably get you an entry-level position at my firm. Help you get your foot in the door somewhere legitimate." "That's very kind," I managed. "I could look at your resume," Cousin Madison offered, her tone suggesting she was doing me an enormous favor. "Give you some pointers. I know it's been a while since you've had to present yourself professionally." I held the line against terrorists who would not break me. I'd been captured once, for 72 hours, and hadn't given up a single piece of intel. My sister's pity should not have cut deeper than any of that. But blood has a way of finding the cracks that armor can't cover. Carrie raised her glass again. To another year of blessings. My promotion, Derek's bonus, and hopefully, finally, some direction for our Vanessa. They drank, all of them. A toast to my failure wrapped in the guise of holiday cheer. I lifted my own glass and took a small sip, my face betraying nothing. This was not the hardest thing I'd ever endured, not by a long shot. But there's something uniquely painful about being dismissed by the people who are supposed to love you. About sitting in a house that I was secretly paying for, listening to the woman who lived in it call me a disappointment. Some debts are paid in silence, while others are collected in shame. Tonight, I was still paying. I finished my wine and poured another glass. 4 more hours until I could reasonably leave. 4 more hours of smiling through the condescension, nodding through the career advice I didn't need, pretending that their words didn't land exactly where they were aimed. I'd survived worse. I'd survive this too. The drive back to my hotel that night took 40 minutes. No radio, no phone calls, just the hum of the engine and the weight of 15 years pressing against my chest. The Connecticut roads were empty, most people home with their families, enjoying the holiday the way families were supposed to. It hadn't always been this way between us. There was a time when I was just Vanessa, the younger Hartley daughter who climbed trees and scraped her knees and dreamed of adventures bigger than our small town could hold. Dad used to say I had fire in me. He'd ruffle my hair after I'd done something particularly reckless and tell me I was going to do something extraordinary someday. "Your sister is careful," he'd say. "But you, Nessa, you're brave. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." Then he died when I was 17. Heart attack at 52, gone before the ambulance arrived. And with him went the only person in my family who ever seemed to understand me. I remember the exact moment Carrie first called me a failure. I was 19, home from my first year of college, sitting at the kitchen table with Mom and my sister. The summer sun streamed through the windows, and I'd been rehearsing the words in my head for weeks, trying to find the right way to explain. "I'm leaving school," I said finally. "I got accepted into a program, a government program. It's an incredible opportunity." Mom's face went pale. Carrie set down her coffee cup with a sharp click against the saucer. "You're dropping out," Carrie said. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "It's not dropping out, it's—" "What kind of program?" Mom interrupted, her voice tight. "What does that even mean, Vanessa?" I couldn't tell them the truth. The recruiter had been very clear about that. The path I was about to walk required absolute silence, total secrecy, and sacrifices they couldn't possibly understand. I couldn't explain that I'd been identified as a candidate for something most people didn't even know existed, that I was about to attempt what only a handful of women in history had ever tried. "I can't give you details," I said carefully, "but it's important work. It's what I want to do with my life." Carrie laughed, actually laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "So you're throwing away your education for some mystery job you can't even explain. That's perfect, Vanessa. Really perfect. This is exactly the kind of impulsive, irresponsible decision I'd expect from you." "Carrie, just listen." "No, I'm serious. You've always been like this. Never thinking things through. Never considering how your choices affect anyone else in this family. Dad's not even here anymore to clean up your messes." The mention of Dad hit like a physical blow. I saw Mom flinch too, but she didn't defend me. She just sat there, looking at me like I'd announced I was joining a cult. "I thought you'd understand," I said quietly. "I thought you might even be proud of me." "Proud?" Carrie shook her head slowly. "You're going to be the family failure, Vanessa. Mark my words. While the rest of us are building actual lives, actual careers, you're going to be out there chasing whatever fantasy you've convinced yourself is real." The family failure. She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather, like she was stating an obvious fact. And Mom didn't correct her, didn't defend me, just sighed heavily and asked if anyone wanted more coffee. I left for Bud S training 3 weeks later. Basic underwater demolition SEAL training. 6 months of the most brutal physical and mental conditioning the military has to offer. The dropout rate is around 75%. Most people don't make it past the first few weeks. The instructor's entire job is to break you, to find your absolute limits and push past them until you either ring the bell and quit or transform into something entirely new. I didn't quit, not once, not ever. I was one of the first women to complete the program. There were moments when I thought I wouldn't make it, when my body felt like it was shutting down and my mind screamed for relief. Hell Week nearly destroyed me. 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 total hours of sleep. We ran miles in the freezing surf. We carried boats over our heads until our arms went numb. We pushed through hypothermia and exhaustion and pain that defied description. Every time I wanted to ring that bell, every time I wanted to surrender to the relief of giving up, I heard my sister's voice in my head. The family failure. So I kept going. I proved her wrong with every stroke, every push-up, every agonizing second I refused to quit. I missed Carrie's wedding because of a deployment. I was on an aircraft carrier in the Pacific Ocean when my sister walked down the aisle. She never forgave me for that. Mom called me selfish. Carrie called me jealous. Neither of them had any idea that I was leading a team extracting hostages from a situation I still can't discuss. That while they were drinking champagne and dancing, I was covered in mud and blood, doing things that would give them nightmares if they knew. I came home when I could, which wasn't often. Each visit followed the same depressing pattern. The same questions about when I'd figure things out. The same unfavorable comparisons to Carrie's corporate success. The same pitying looks from extended family members who'd been fed the narrative of Vanessa, the lost cause. Thanksgiving when I was 25 stands out clearly in my memory. I'd been back from an operation for less than a week. I still had bruises hidden under my sweater, a cracked rib that hadn't fully healed. But I smiled through dinner, answered questions vaguely, and pretended everything was fine. Until Carrie cornered me in the kitchen while we were cleaning up. "So," she said, loading the dishwasher with aggressive efficiency, "have you figured things out yet? Or are you still doing whatever it is you do?" "I'm doing well, actually. Got a promotion recently." "A promotion to what? You never explain anything, Vanessa. It's like you're living in some fantasy world where being mysterious is a substitute for actual accomplishment." I thought about the Navy Cross citation folded in my wallet, the letter from the Admiral personally thanking me for my service, the teammates who would take a bullet for me without a moment's hesitation. "I'm doing important work," I said simply. "Work that matters." "Important," Carrie laughed dismissively. "Right. Well, some of us are living in the real world, Vanessa. Some of us have mortgages and responsibilities and careers that people can actually verify exist." I helped her finish the dishes in complete silence. The only person who ever looked at me differently was Nana. Grandmother Alina, 84 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only family member who seemed to see through the surface to something deeper. She pulled me aside during a visit when I was 28. Led me to the back porch where we could talk without being overheard. "I see you, sweetheart," she said, taking my hand in her papery grip. "Whatever you're doing out there, I know it matters." "Nana, I wish I could tell you." "You don't have to explain anything to me." Her eyes met mine, clear and knowing. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. The way you carry yourself, the way you watch a room when you enter it, the scars I've seen on your arms that you think no one notices. That's not the posture of someone who's lost their way. That's the posture of someone who's found their purpose." For the first time in years, I couldn't speak. After so long being dismissed and pitied, here was someone who saw me clearly. "Thank you," I finally managed. "Don't let them make you small, Vanessa. Promise me. Whatever you're doing out there, don't let their blindness diminish what you've become." I promised, and I kept that promise through every holiday, every condescending comment, every toast to my supposed failure. 2 years later, I discovered Carrie and Derek were struggling financially. I'd come home for a brief visit, and late one night, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. Missed payments. The mortgage underwater. Derek's firm not performing the way he'd told everyone it was. I could have felt satisfied, could have seen it as karma finally catching up. Instead, I made some calls. Set up an anonymous payment through Navy Federal Credit Union. Started transferring money monthly to her mortgage company. She'd never know. For 4 years, I watched Carrie brag about her financial genius while I paid her bills in silence. Nana passed 3 months before that Christmas dinner, leaving me a letter I carry everywhere. They'll see you someday, my fierce girl. I hope you're gentle with them, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Pulling into the hotel parking lot, I wondered if she'd been too optimistic. Some people never see what's in front of them. The week after Christmas passed quietly. I spent New Year's Eve on base, sharing pizza with my team and watching fireworks from the roof of the barracks. It was better that way. Simpler. These were my people, the ones who knew exactly who I was and respected me for it. I'd almost managed to push the holiday dinner out of my mind when my phone rang on January 3rd. Carrie's name flashed on the screen. She rarely called me outside of obligatory holiday check-ins, and even then, she preferred group texts where she could broadcast her announcements without having to engage in actual conversation. I answered on the fourth ring. Hello. Vanessa. Her voice was strange, tight and controlled, but with something underneath that I couldn't quite identify. I need you to explain something to me. What's going on? I got a letter from the bank today about the mortgage. She paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. It says the mortgage has been paid in full, the entire remaining balance, over $280,000. My heart rate stayed steady. Years of training had taught me to control my physiological responses, to keep my voice calm even when everything inside me was screaming. That's great news, isn't it? Don't play dumb with me, her voice sharpened. The letter says the payment came from a U.S. Navy federal account, an anonymous naval service member. I said nothing. I called the bank, she continued. Spent 2 hours on the phone trying to figure out what the hell was going on. They confirmed it. Someone has been making payments on my mortgage for almost 4 years, and this final payment cleared the entire remaining balance. Carrie, I'm not finished. Her voice cracked slightly, the controls slipping. I made them trace the account. Took some convincing, but they finally told me the payments came from an account registered to V. Hartley. Same last name. Same home address on file from years ago. The silence stretched between us, heavy and loaded. How, she finally whispered. How is this possible? How does someone who can't even hold down a real job have access to $400,000? I closed my eyes. I'd known this moment might come eventually, but I'd always hoped the anonymity would hold. That she'd simply accept the gift and move on with her life. That I could keep loving her from a distance without ever having to explain myself. I wanted to help, I said simply. That's all. That's all, her voice rose. Vanessa, what the hell is going on? What have you been doing all these years? Are you involved in something illegal? Is this drug money? Because I swear to God, if you've put my family at risk. It's not illegal. Then explain it to me. Explain how my dropout sister who drifts through life with no direction somehow has enough money to pay off my entire mortgage without even noticing the expense. I thought about all the ways I could answer that question. The classified operations I couldn't discuss. The salary that had accumulated over years of deployments where I had nothing to spend money on. The hazard pay and bonuses that piled up while I was too busy staying alive to go shopping. I have a good job, I said. A real job, I've had it for 15 years. With the Navy. Yes. Doing what exactly? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep the secret forever, to maintain the protective distance I'd built. But another part, the part that was tired of being dismissed, tired of being pitied, tired of watching my family toast to my failure year after year, wanted them to finally know. I can't discuss specifics over the phone, I said carefully. But I'm not the person you think I am, Carrie. I haven't been for a very long time. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Less angry, more confused. I don't understand any of this. I know you don't. Mom called me this morning. She got a similar letter. Apparently you've been helping her with her property taxes too. I hadn't planned on that coming out either. Just another quiet act I'd performed out of duty and love, never expecting recognition. She needed help, I said. She wasn't going to ask for it. But why? Why would you do all this when we've... She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. When we've treated you like garbage, I thought. When we've mocked you and dismissed you and made you feel worthless at every opportunity. Because you're my family, I said. That doesn't change just because things are complicated. The phone calls continued over the next few days. Mom called, crying and confused. Aunt Patricia called, suddenly interested in my life in a way she'd never been before. Even Derek left a voicemail, his tone carefully professional, asking if we could discuss the financial situation like adults. I ignored most of them. I was back at base, preparing for an upcoming training exercise, and I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to navigate their sudden curiosity. But Carrie wouldn't let it go. She called 3 more times, each conversation more demanding than the last. I need answers, Vanessa. I can't sleep. I can't think. You've completely upended everything I thought I knew. Maybe some things needed to be upended. That's not fair. You can't just drop this bomb and then refuse to explain. She was right, in a way. I'd spent so many years hiding that I'd forgotten how to reveal. The anonymity had been comfortable, safe. It had allowed me to love my family without having to confront their rejection. But the bank had made that choice for me, and now I had to decide how to move forward. I called Admiral Webb that evening. She'd been my commanding officer for 3 years, and she knew more about my family situation than anyone else in the military. I'd mentioned it once, during a particularly difficult deployment, and she'd remembered. I need to request permission for limited disclosure, I said. My family has discovered some financial activity that's raised questions. They're starting to investigate on their own, and I'm worried about what they might uncover. What kind of disclosure? My rank, my general position. Nothing classified, but enough to explain how I've been able to help them financially. She was quiet for a moment. Your family, the ones who don't know about your service. Yes, ma'am. The ones you've mentioned before, who think you're some kind of drifter. I winced at the characterization, even though it was accurate. Yes, ma'am. I see. Another pause. Vanessa, I've served with you for years. You're one of the finest officers I've ever had under my command. If your family doesn't know that, maybe it's time they learned. I was hoping to avoid. I'm not just granting permission, she interrupted. I'm offering support. If you need to have this conversation, I want to be there. Your record speaks for itself, and sometimes these things land better when they come from someone other than the person involved. I hadn't expected that. Admiral Webb was not known for personal involvement in her officers' family matters, but she'd always been fair, and she'd always been direct. Thank you, ma'am. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. From what you've told me, your sister isn't going to let this rest. Better to control the narrative than let it spiral. She was right. Carrie had already texted demanding a family meeting. Everyone would be there. Mom, Derek, Aunt Patricia, they wanted answers. I texted back a single line, January 15th. I'll be there. The date had significance only I understood. It was the anniversary of my first deployment, the day I'd officially begun the journey that would transform me from college dropout to Navy SEAL. It seemed fitting somehow. If my family wanted to see who I really was, they'd see everything. The morning of January 15th dawned gray and cold, typical Connecticut winter, weather that matched the knot forming in my stomach. I'd faced down armed combatants in 3 continents, led operations that would remain classified for decades, and earned the respect of admirals who didn't give it easily. But the thought of walking into my sister's living room made my palms sweat in a way no combat situation ever had. I spent the morning reviewing briefing materials out of habit, though there was nothing to brief. This wasn't a mission. There were no tactical objectives, no extraction plans, no backup if things went sideways. This was just family, and that was somehow more terrifying than anything I'd encountered in uniform. Admiral Webb had called the night before to confirm arrangements. She'd be arriving separately, along with Lieutenant Chen and Senior Chief Patterson, 2 members of my team who'd insisted on being there when they heard what was happening. You don't have to do this, I'd told them. This is personal business. Commander, with respect, Patterson had said, his gruff voice softening slightly. You've had our backs more times than I can count. Let us have yours for once." I didn't argue. The truth was, I was grateful. Walking into that house alone felt like walking into an ambush without support. I arrived at Carrie's house at exactly 2 o'clock, the time she'd specified in her increasingly frantic text messages. Her street looked different in January than it had at Christmas. The decorations were gone, the inflatable snowman deflated and stored, leaving just the bare bones of suburban prosperity. The McMansion looked somehow smaller without its holiday glamour. I parked the rental car and sat for a moment, centering myself the way I did before any high-stakes operation. Breath in for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. My heart rate steadied. My mind cleared. I was not the frightened 19-year-old who'd left this family behind. I was Lieutenant Commander Vanessa Hartley, and I had earned every letter of that title. The front door opened before I could knock. Carrie stood there, arms crossed, her face a mixture of exhaustion and barely contained frustration. She looked like she hadn't slept well in days. Behind her, I could see Mom hovering near the couch, Derek standing by the fireplace with a glass of something amber, and Aunt Patricia perched on the edge of an armchair like a vulture waiting for carrion. "You're here," Carrie said flatly. "Finally." I said 2 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock. She stepped back to let me in, her eyes scanning me with renewed intensity. I knew what she was seeing. I dressed deliberately for this meeting. Simple dark clothes, nothing flashy, but I'd let my posture speak for itself. The way I moved, the way I held my shoulders, the confidence that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of. "Vanessa," Mom said, rising from the couch. Her face was blotchy, like she'd been crying recently. "Honey, we're all just so confused." "I know, Mom." "Sit down," Carrie commanded, gesturing to the same overflow spot I'd occupied at Christmas. This time I didn't take it. Instead, I chose the armchair nearest the window, positioning myself with my back to the wall and a clear view of the room. Old habits. Derek cleared his throat. "Look, Vanessa, we're not trying to attack you here. We just need to understand what's going on. The mortgage situation, the money, the secrecy, it doesn't add up." "Because you've been working with incomplete information," I said calmly. "Then complete it for us," Carrie snapped. "I've been going crazy trying to figure this out. How does someone who dropped out of college, who's never held a real job as far as any of us knew, suddenly have access to hundreds of thousands of dollars? Either you're lying about something, or we've missed something massive." "You've missed something massive." She waited, her jaw tight. "Well." I let the silence stretch for a moment, considering how to begin. 15 years of secrets didn't unravel easily. There was no single sentence that could bridge the gap between who they thought I was and who I'd become. "When I left college," I said finally, "I didn't drop out because I was lost. I left because I'd been recruited for a specialized military program, a program I wasn't allowed to discuss with anyone." Mom's hand flew to her chest. "Military? You joined the military." "The Navy, specifically. I've been serving for 15 years. Derek let out a skeptical laugh. "The Navy? Doing what, filing papers?" I turned to look at him, holding his gaze until his smile faltered. "No, Derek, not filing papers." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Admiral Webb, 5 minutes out. I acknowledged it silently. "I don't understand," Carrie said. "If you joined the Navy, why wouldn't you just tell us? Why all the secrecy? Why let us think you were some kind of failure all these years?" "Because the nature of my work required discretion, and because—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Because by the time I could have told you, you'd already decided who I was. Every time I came home, every holiday, every visit, you made it very clear what you thought of me. The family failure, the disappointment, the one who couldn't get her life together." Mom made a small sound of protest, but I continued. "It became easier to let you believe that than to try to change your minds. And honestly, part of me wanted to prove that I didn't need your approval to be successful, that I could achieve things you'd never imagine while you were busy pitying me." "That's not fair," Carrie said, her voice rising. "If you just told us." "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. If I'd come to you 5 years ago and said I was a decorated naval officer who'd led combat operations around the world, would you have believed a single word? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. The answer was written on her face. No, she wouldn't have believed it. None of them would have. Someone like you, I said, echoing her words from the phone call, couldn't possibly achieve something like that. That's what you were thinking. That's what you've always thought. The room fell silent. Even Aunt Patricia had nothing to say, which might have been a first. My phone buzzed again. They're here. Here's the thing, Carrie, I continued. I didn't pay your mortgage to prove anything to you. I did it because Dad would have wanted you to have security. Because despite everything you've said about me, everything you've assumed, you're still my sister. I never needed your approval to help you. I just did it because it was the right thing to do. But how? Derek interjected, recovering his voice. Even with a military salary, we're talking about almost $400,000 over 4 years. That's... The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Carrie looked toward the door, confusion replacing frustration. I'm not expecting anyone, she said. I am, I replied, standing. I asked some colleagues to join us. I thought it might help clarify things. Derek moved toward the door before Carrie could. He opened it and immediately stepped back, his face draining of color. 2 Navy officers stood on the porch in full dress uniform. Their ribbons and medals caught the weak January sunlight. Behind them, I could see Admiral Webb emerging from a black SUV that had pulled into the driveway, her own uniform immaculate, stars gleaming on her shoulders. Good afternoon, Lieutenant Chen said formally. We're looking for Lieutenant Commander Hartley. Derek's mouth opened and closed. Lieutenant Commander, there's no one here by that. I'm here, Lieutenant, I said, stepping into view. Come in. Chen and Patterson entered first, their presence immediately transforming the suburban living room into something else entirely. These were serious men, career military, and they moved with the same controlled precision I did. Behind them, Admiral Webb entered, and I heard Mom gasp. Admiral on deck, Patterson murmured, more out of habit than necessity. I saw Carrie's face go white at the word. Admiral Webb removed her cover and surveyed the room with the same keen assessment she brought to everything. Her gaze swept over my family, taking in their shock, their confusion, their dawning realization that they had profoundly miscalculated. Lieutenant Commander Hartley, she said, nodding to me. Thank you for arranging this. Thank you for coming, Admiral. She turned to face my family, who looked like they'd been collectively struck by lightning. Derek was still standing by the door, frozen. Mom had both hands over her mouth. Carrie had gone so pale I worried she might faint, and Aunt Patricia was gripping the arms of her chair like she might fly away if she let go. I apologize for the intrusion, Admiral Webb said, her voice carrying the authority of 30 years in naval leadership. But when I learned how Lieutenant Commander Hartley's family had misunderstood her contributions, I felt her service record should speak for itself. Lieutenant Commander, Carrie whispered. Yes, Admiral Webb glanced at me, then back at my sister. Your sister is one of the most decorated women in naval special warfare history. I've served with her for 3 years, and I can tell you without hesitation that she is one of the finest officers I've ever had the privilege of commanding. The silence that followed was absolute. Admiral Webb moved further into the room, her presence commanding attention without effort. She'd spent 3 decades in the Navy, rising through the ranks in an era when women in naval leadership were rare. She knew what it meant to be underestimated, and I could see in her eyes that she understood exactly what was happening in this room. Perhaps we should all sit down, she suggested, though it wasn't really a suggestion. This may take some time to explain. Derek finally closed the front door, moving like a man in a dream. He made his way back to the fireplace but didn't pick up his drink again. His hands were shaking slightly. Lieutenant Chen and Senior Chief Patterson positioned themselves near the wall, at ease but alert. They'd both volunteered for this, and I could feel their quiet support like a physical presence at my back. I don't understand, Mom said, her voice trembling. Vanessa, what is all this? What is naval special warfare? Admiral Webb looked at me, giving me the opportunity to answer. I took a breath. I'm a Navy SEAL, Mom. The words hung in the air. Carrie made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. That's impossible, she said. Women can't be SEALs. They can now, I replied. I was one of the first to complete the training and be assigned to a team. That was over a decade ago. But you, Carrie shook her head, as if trying to physically reject the information. You dropped out of college. You disappeared for years. You came home looking like you'd been living on the streets sometimes. That doesn't match. Bud-ass training doesn't leave you looking fresh and polished, I said. Neither does deployment. Neither does spending weeks in hostile territory with minimal supplies. When I came home looking rough, it wasn't because I was failing at life. It was because I'd been doing things that would give most people nightmares. Admiral Webb stepped forward, pulling a folder from the briefcase Lieutenant Chen had carried in. With Lieutenant Commander Hartley's permission, I'd like to share some declassified portions of her service record. It may help provide context. I nodded, and she opened the folder. Vanessa Hartley enlisted in the Navy at 19. She completed basic underwater demolition SEAL training at 20, making her one of the youngest women to ever attempt the program, and one of the first to successfully complete it. Her class started with over 200 candidates. Fewer than 40 graduated. She was one of them. Mom's hand found its way to her heart again. Carrie hadn't moved at all. Following her initial training, Admiral Webb continued, Lieutenant Commander Hartley was assigned to SEAL Team 4, where she participated in multiple overseas deployments. The specific nature of these operations remains classified, but I can tell you they involved counterterrorism, hostage rescue, and direct action missions in some of the most dangerous regions in the world. She turned a page in the folder. At 24, Lieutenant Commander Hartley was awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat. The details of the action are classified, but I can tell you that her actions that day saved the lives of 6 American service members and an undisclosed number of foreign nationals who had been taken hostage. The Navy Cross, Derek repeated weakly. That's a big deal, right? It's the second highest award for valor in the United States Navy, Admiral Webb said. Only the Medal of Honor ranks above it. Your sister-in-law is one of a handful of women in history to receive it. Carrie's legs seemed to give out. She sank onto the nearest chair, her face slack with shock. Following her actions and subsequent promotion, Admiral Webb continued, Lieutenant Commander Hartley was transferred to SEAL Team 7, where she currently serves as second in command. She oversees training operations, mission planning, and direct leadership of some of our most elite operators. She closed the folder and looked around the room. As for the financial question that prompted this gathering, Lieutenant Commander Hartley's salary, combined with hazard pay, deployment bonuses, and various allowances, places her income well into 6 figures annually. She has minimal personal expenses due to the nature of her service, and she has used her accumulated savings to support her family without seeking recognition or gratitude. The room was silent, except for the sound of Mom crying quietly. I watched my family process this information. Derek had finally sat down, his face the color of old paper. Aunt Patricia looked like she'd swallowed something unpleasant. Cousin Madison, whom I hadn't noticed arriving, was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, her phone hanging forgotten in her hand. And Carrie, my sister, who had called me the family failure at every opportunity for 15 years, who had toasted to my lack of direction at Christmas dinner, who had offered to review my resume like I was some kind of charity case. She was staring at me like she'd never seen me before, and in a way, she hadn't. Commander, Senior Chief Patterson spoke up, addressing me directly. Permission to speak. Go ahead, Senior Chief. He stepped forward slightly, his weathered face serious. I've served under a lot of officers in my 22 years in the Navy. Lieutenant Commander Hartley is the best of them, bar none. Last year, she led an operation to extract 3 captured Americans from a situation I can't discuss. She took 2 rounds to her vest and kept moving, got our people out alive. He paused, his jaw tight with emotion he rarely showed. With respect to everyone in this room, this woman is a hero. Not the kind you see in movies, the real kind. The kind who does impossible things in the dark and never talks about it. And if her own family didn't know that until now, that's not her failure. That's just the cost of the job. "Thank you, Senior Chief," I said quietly. Lieutenant Chen added, "The commander's team would follow her anywhere. We have followed her anywhere. Afghanistan, Syria, places I can't name. She's earned every salute she's ever received." I saw Carrie flinch at the word salute. She was looking at the ribbons on Admiral Webb's uniform, at the insignia on Chen and Patterson's shoulders, at the way they all deferred to me as a matter of course. "All those years," Mom whispered. "All those times you came home and we asked what you were doing, and you couldn't tell us." "No, Mom, I couldn't. But we said such awful things. We treated you like—" She couldn't finish. "Like a failure," I completed for her. "I know, I was there." Carrie finally found her voice. "Why didn't you say something, anything? You let us believe you were nothing. You let me—" Her voice broke. "Every Christmas, every holiday. I said such horrible things and you just sat there and took it." "What would you have had me do, Carrie? Announce that I was a Navy SEAL? Show up in uniform and demand respect? That's not who I am. That's not why I do what I do. But to let us think." "I didn't let you think anything. You decided who I was before I ever had a chance to tell you otherwise. When I left for training, you called me a failure before I'd even started. When I missed your wedding because I was on deployment, you called me selfish without bothering to ask why I couldn't be there. Every time I came home, you'd already decided I was worthless. What was I supposed to do? Beg you to believe me?" She had no answer. None of them did. Admiral Webb cleared her throat. I should add that Lieutenant Commander Hartley never complained about her family situation. I learned about it only because she mentioned it once during a particularly difficult deployment. She said she was used to being underestimated, that it made her work harder. She looked at me with something like respect. I told her then that she had nothing to prove to anyone. She'd already proven herself 1,000 times over in ways her family would never see. But I understand why she wanted this moment, why she wanted you to know. I wasn't sure I'd wanted this moment, actually. I'd spent years carefully avoiding it. But now that it was here, now that the truth was finally out, I felt something shifting inside me. A weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it was there. "The mortgage payments," Carrie said slowly, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You were paying our mortgage. All those times I bragged about our financial planning, about getting ahead on payments." "That was you," Derek finished, looking ill. "We thought we were being smart, we were taking credit for." "For my work," I said simply. "Yes." "But why?" Carrie's voice cracked. "After everything we said, everything we did, why would you help us?" I thought about how to answer that. About the father we'd lost who'd always told me to look out for my sister. About Nana, who'd made me promise to be gentle with them. About the simple truth that family was family, even when family was cruel. "Because some debts are paid in silence," I said finally. "I never needed you to know. I never needed your gratitude or your approval. I did it because it was the right thing to do and because Dad would have wanted you to be secure. The fact that you found out wasn't part of the plan." The tears were streaming down Carrie's face now. "I've been living in a house you paid for, making fun of you while you were out there saving lives, while you were getting shot at, while you were—" She couldn't continue. I watched her cry, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a deep, bone-tired sadness for all the years we'd lost, all the moments we could have been actual sisters instead of strangers. "I didn't do this to make you feel bad," I said. "I did it because, despite everything, I love you. You're my sister. That means something to me, even if it apparently didn't mean much to you." Carrie looked up at me, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "How can you say that? How can you still love me after how I treated you?" "Because love isn't a transaction, Carrie. It's not something you earn or lose based on behavior. It's just there. What you do with it is up to you." Admiral Webb signaled to Chen and Patterson, and they moved toward the door. "Lieutenant Commander, we should be going soon." You have obligations at base." I nodded, grateful for the exit strategy. This conversation had gone on long enough, and I wasn't sure how much more emotional excavation I could handle in one afternoon. "Wait," Carrie said, rising unsteadily. "You can't just leave. We have so much to talk about. I have so many questions. I need to apologize, properly, for everything." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was the same woman who had called me the family failure just 3 weeks ago. But something had cracked in her facade, and underneath I could see the frightened, insecure person she'd always been. The person who needed someone to look down on to feel good about herself. "Carrie," I said quietly, "I appreciate that. I do. But apologies aren't magic. They don't erase 15 years of cruelty just because you finally know the truth. I forgave you a long time ago because holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to normal." "Then what does it mean?" "It means we start over, slowly, honestly, without assumptions about who each other is." She nodded, tears still falling. "I want that. I want to know who you really are." "Then you have my number. Use it differently than you have." I turned to gather my things, but before I could take a step, Mom intercepted me. She moved faster than I'd seen her move in years, crossing the room to stand directly in front of me, her face a wreck of tears and smeared makeup. "Vanessa," her voice broke on my name. "Please, before you go, I need to say something." I waited, keeping my expression neutral even though my heart was pounding. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I never defended you. All those years, all those times Carrie said those horrible things, and I just sat there. I let it happen. I let my own daughter be treated like garbage in her own family, and I did nothing." She reached for my hands, and after a moment's hesitation, I let her take them. Her fingers were cold and trembling. "I told myself I was staying neutral," she continued. "I told myself I didn't want to take sides between my daughters. But that wasn't neutrality, was it? That was just cowardice. I was so focused on keeping the peace that I let one daughter destroy the other." "Mom." "No, let me finish." She squeezed my hands tighter. "Your father would be so ashamed of me. He always saw something special in you. He always said you were going to do something extraordinary. And you did. You became exactly what he knew you could be, and I wasn't there to see it. I wasn't there to support you. I was too busy siding with the daughter who made me feel comfortable." I felt something shift in my chest. Some old wound that I'd thought had scarred over completely, reopening just enough to let a little light in. "I stopped waiting for you to see me a long time ago, Mom," I said quietly. "I just never stopped loving you anyway." She let out a sob and pulled me into a hug. I let her hold me for a moment, feeling her shoulders shake with 15 years of guilt finally finding release. It wasn't enough. One hug couldn't fix what had been broken between us. But it was something, a first step on a very long road. "You could have defended me once," I said into her shoulder. "Just once, that's all I ever needed." "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." I pulled back gently and looked at her. "Regret is a starting point, Mom, not an ending." She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I want to do better. I want to know about your life, your real life. Will you let me try?" "I'll give you the chance. What you do with it is up to you." Derek cleared his throat awkwardly. He'd risen from the couch at some point and was standing a few feet away, looking like a man who desperately wanted to disappear but knew he couldn't. "Commander, Vanessa, I owe you an apology too." His voice had lost all its usual smugness. "All those comments about helping you find a career, offering you entry-level positions at my firm. I had no idea. I was completely out of line." I turned to face him, and he actually flinched. This was the same man who'd spent years making jokes at my expense, who'd looked at me with barely concealed contempt at every family gathering, who'd treated me like a charity case he was generously tolerating. "You offered to give me career guidance," I said evenly. "You offered to help me get my foot in the door somewhere legitimate. Do you remember that?" He swallowed hard. "I remember. I've led combat operations in 6 countries. I've commanded men who would die for me without hesitation. I've made decisions under fire that you couldn't comprehend in your worst nightmares, and you offered to review my resume. I didn't know. No, you didn't. But here's the thing, Derek. You didn't know because you never asked. None of you ever asked. You all just assumed you knew who I was and what I was worth, and you treated me accordingly. He had no response. His face had gone gray, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead. My finances are handled by people who never called me a charity case, I continued. But thank you for the offer. Aunt Patricia had been sitting in silence throughout all of this, which was remarkable in itself. The woman never stopped talking at family gatherings, always ready with an opinion or a piece of gossip. But now she seemed frozen in her chair, her wine glass still suspended in midair where it had been when the Navy officers entered. I always knew there was something special about you, Vanessa, she said suddenly, her voice too bright, too eager. I told your mother, didn't I, Linda? I said that girl is going to surprise us all someday. I turned to look at her, and she wilted under my gaze. Did you, Aunt Patricia? Because I remember you asking me at every family gathering if I was still doing whatever it is I do. I remember you spreading the story of how I was the family disappointment to anyone who would listen. I remember you laughing at Carrie's jokes about my lack of direction. She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. The wine glass finally lowered, set carefully on the side table with a hand that shook slightly. People say a lot of things, she mumbled. Family can be complicated. Yes, it can. I didn't offer her the same reconciliation I'd offered Carrie and Mom. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding. Some people weren't worth the emotional investment. Aunt Patricia had never been family in any meaningful sense, just a relative who showed up at gatherings and made everyone's life worse. Cousin Madison had slipped out of the room at some point. I'd seen her retreat toward the back of the house, unable to meet my eyes. She was young enough that I didn't hold her behavior against her too strongly. She'd learned cruelty at Carrie's feet, and maybe now she could learn something different. Admiral Webb touched my elbow gently. Lieutenant Commander, the car is waiting. I nodded. It was time to go. This room, this house that I'd been secretly paying for all these years, suddenly felt suffocating. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to be around people who had never doubted who I was. Before I go, I said, reaching into my pocket, there's something I want to share. I pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the creases from being handled so many times. Nana's letter. The one she'd left me when she died, the only inheritance I'd wanted from her estate. Nana wrote this to me, I said. She left it in her will. I've been carrying it with me since she passed. Carrie made a small sound. Nana knew about who you really are. She didn't know the specifics, but she saw me. She was the only one who ever did. I unfolded the letter carefully and began to read aloud. My dearest Vanessa, if you're reading this, then I've gone on to wherever it is we go when we leave this world. I hope it's somewhere warm with good coffee and no arthritis. A watery laugh escaped Mom. That sounded exactly like Nana. I want you to know that I've always been proud of you, I continued. Even when I didn't know exactly what you were doing, I knew it mattered. I could see it in the way you carried yourself, in the scars you tried to hide, in the quiet strength that grew in you year after year, even as your family failed to notice. My voice wavered slightly, but I pushed through. They'll see you someday, my fierce girl. And when they do, I hope you're gentle with them. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. You deserve to be free of bitterness. You deserve to walk through life without carrying the weight of their ignorance on your shoulders. I paused, swallowing hard. Your father saw the fire in you before anyone else did. He told me once that you were going to do something extraordinary, and he was never wrong about things like that. I just wish he could have lived to see it. I wish I could live to see the day when everyone else finally catches up to what we always knew. The room was completely silent now. Even Aunt Patricia had stopped fidgeting. Never let them make you small, sweetheart. You are exactly who you were meant to be. And whoever that person is, whatever you've done and whatever you've sacrificed, Know that there was always one old woman in Connecticut who loved you completely and believed in you absolutely." I folded the letter carefully and returned it to my pocket. "Nana understood something the rest of you never did," I said quietly. "She understood that worth isn't measured by what you can display or brag about. It's measured by what you do when no one's watching, by the sacrifices you make for people who will never thank you, by the strength it takes to keep showing up for family members who treat you like garbage." Carrie was crying again, silently this time. "She's the one who taught me that some debts are paid in silence," I continued. "That you don't help people because they deserve it or because they'll appreciate it. You help them because helping is the right thing to do, because that's who you want to be." I looked around the room one final time. "I'm establishing a scholarship in Nana's name," I said, "for first-generation college students from military families. If any of you want to contribute, I'll send the details." Mom nodded immediately, still wiping her eyes. "I want to contribute, please." Even Derek managed a jerky nod of agreement. "Some debts are paid in silence, while others are collected in shame," I said, meeting Carrie's eyes. "Your debt to the bank is clear now. What you owe yourself for how you treated me, that's yours to figure out." Admiral Webb moved to the door, followed by Chen and Patterson. I fell into step beside them, feeling the familiar comfort of military protocol after the chaos of family emotion. "Vanessa," Carrie called out, I'm so sorry for everything." I paused at the door and turned back. "I know you are, that's a start." The January air hit my face like a blessing when I stepped outside. Cold and clean and free of the emotional weight that had filled that living room for the past hour. I took a deep breath, feeling my lungs expand fully, feeling my shoulders drop from the tension I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Admiral Webb walked beside me down the path toward the waiting SUVs. Chen and Patterson fell into step behind us, their presence steady and reassuring in the way that only fellow warriors could provide. These were my people. This was my world. And for the first time in 15 years, my family had finally glimpsed what that world looked like. We were almost to the vehicles when I heard footsteps behind me. Quick, uneven, almost desperate in their pace. "Vanessa, wait, please." I turned to find Carrie hurrying down the front steps, her arms wrapped around herself against the biting cold. She hadn't stopped to grab a coat, hadn't even put on shoes. She was standing on the frozen walkway in nothing but her socks, shivering violently, her face still streaked with mascara and tears. "What is it, Carrie?" She stopped a few feet away from me, hugging herself tighter as the wind cut through her thin sweater. "I can't let you leave like this. I can't let you go back to whatever dangerous thing you're doing, wherever you go, without saying what I need to say." I waited, keeping my expression neutral even though something was shifting inside my chest. Admiral Webb had paused by the SUV, giving us space, but remaining close enough to intervene if needed. "All those years," Carrie said, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "All those things I said to you. I thought I was better than you. I genuinely believed I had figured out life and you hadn't. I built my entire identity around being the successful sister, the one who had it together, the one everyone in the family could point to with pride." She laughed bitterly, the sound catching in her throat. "And the whole time, the entire time, you were out there doing things I can't even imagine. Saving lives, leading soldiers into combat, getting shot at. You were a genuine hero, and I was sitting in a house you were secretly paying for, making fun of you at Christmas dinner like it was sport." "Carrie." "No, let me finish." She took a shaky breath, her whole body trembling from cold and emotion. "I don't know how to live with that. I don't know how to look in the mirror knowing what I did to you. Every single holiday, every family gathering, I made absolutely sure everyone knew that Vanessa was the failure. That Vanessa couldn't get her life together. That Vanessa was the cautionary tale we should all pity." Her voice cracked completely. "And you just took it. You sat there and took it, year after year, never defending yourself, never fighting back. Then you went home and wrote checks to pay my mortgage. What kind of person does that? What kind of person endures that cruelty and responds with that kind of generosity?" "The kind of person Dad raised me to be," I said quietly. The kind of person Nana always believed I was. She shook her head violently, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. I don't deserve you as a sister. I never did, not for a single moment. I looked at her for a long time, really seeing her. This was the woman who had made my family visit a special kind of hell for 15 years, who had wielded her words like precision weapons, always finding the exact spot where they would cause maximum damage, who had smiled and laughed while systematically tearing me down in front of everyone we shared blood with. But she was also the little girl I remembered from childhood, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms because she was scared, the one who held my hand at Dad's funeral when we were both too young to understand that our world had just shattered, the one who, underneath all her insecurity and cruelty, was still my sister. You're right, I said finally. You don't deserve me, not yet. But that can change, Carrie. People can change if they're genuinely willing to do the hard work. I want to change. I want to be different. I want to be the kind of sister you deserved all along. Then start now. Start by being brutally honest with yourself about why you needed me to be a failure. Start by examining what it says about you that you couldn't feel successful unless someone else was beneath you. Start by becoming someone Nana would have been proud of. She nodded, wiping her face with hands that were turning red from the cold. Will you give me a chance to prove I can be different? I thought about it carefully. The easy thing would be to walk away, to leave her standing in the cold with her guilt and her regret, to cut ties permanently with a family that had never valued me. I had a life that didn't need them. I had purpose and meaning and people who respected me for exactly who I was. I didn't need Carrie's approval or her love. But Nana's words echoed in my mind, as clear as if she were standing beside me. I hope you're gentle with them, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You deserve to be free of bitterness. I'll give you a chance, I said finally. One chance, use it wisely. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. I won't waste it. I swear I won't. Don't make promises you can't keep. Just show me through your actions. That's all I've ever wanted from any of you. Admiral Webb cleared her throat gently from beside the SUV. Lieutenant Commander, we really do need to get moving. I nodded and turned toward the vehicle. Then I paused and looked at my sister one more time. Carrie, go inside before you get frostbite. I mean it. A laugh escaped her, watery and surprised despite everything. Always looking out for me, even now after everything. That's what sisters do. I climbed into the SUV, and Chen closed the door behind me with practiced efficiency. Through the tinted window, I watched Carrie standing on the walkway, watching us leave. She raised one hand in a small, tentative wave, and after a moment, I found myself raising mine in return. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, leaving the McMansion behind, leaving 15 years of pain and silence and unacknowledged sacrifice in the rearview mirror where they belonged. Well, Admiral Webb said from the seat beside me, that was certainly intense. Yes, ma'am, it was. How do you feel? I considered the question seriously. How did I feel? There was relief, certainly. The secret I'd carried for so long was finally out in the open. There was bone-deep exhaustion from the emotional gauntlet I'd just walked through. There was grief for all the years that had been wasted, all the moments that could have been different. But underneath all of that, there was something unexpected, something that felt almost like peace. Lighter, I said finally. Like I've been carrying a weight I'd forgotten I was holding, and someone finally lifted it off my shoulders. That sounds about right. Patterson leaned forward from the back seat. Permission to speak freely, Commander. Always, Senior Chief. That was one of the most satisfying things I've witnessed in 22 years of service. The look on that brother-in-law's face when he realized he'd been offering career advice to a Navy Cross recipient. He shook his head slowly, grinning. I'll be dining out on that story for years. Despite everything, I smiled, glad I could provide entertainment. Not entertainment, Chen added. Justice. They finally saw who you really are, that matters. He was right. It did matter. Not because I needed their approval or their respect, but because the truth had finally been told. My phone buzzed. A text from Carrie. I meant what I said. Can we have coffee when you're back? I typed back, I'd like that. I'll let you know when I'm stateside. Her response came immediately. Thank you for everything. I tucked the phone away and looked out at Connecticut rolling past. The trees were bare, waiting for spring. Everything looked suspended between what had been and what might yet become. Where to now, Commander? Patterson asked. Back to base, training exercise next week. Admiral Webb nodded approvingly. The mission always comes first. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Nana's letter was a comfortable weight against my heart. They'll see you someday, my fierce girl. They'd seen me, finally. The road ahead would be complicated, but the truth was out. The house on Maple Street would always carry my sister's name. But now it also carried my truth, proof that the family failure had been holding them up all along. Some debts are paid in silence. Today, mine finally was. I am now, I whispered. I am now.